Welcome to the raster classification tutorial. As I said in the text, uh, raster classification or imagery classification, it's really a field within itself, and it's incredibly complex. And this plugin that we're going to be using is very powerful and not always very easy to use. But my goal here is to give you just the simplest and the clearest tutorial through it. I'm really hoping that you'll walk away from this with an understanding of what raster classification is and some of the ways it can be used. Um, and yeah, if the goal is for this to be simple and straightforward, if you get stuck, let me know. There's a lot of ways to go wrong. I'm going to try to be as clear as possible, and we'll get through it. I'm joined today by my assistant teacher, Oscar. Hi. Oh, there he was. All right. Let me get myself out of the way here. Beep. So, starting from scratch, so every step of the way. As you guys have gone through the various modules, you've probably noticed that your workspaces tend to get pretty full and pretty messy. There's definitely an art to keeping a clean GIS workspace, and a part of that is to start a new project and a new folder for each associated with each project. So let's go ahead and do that here. I'll make a folder first. Working out of OneDrive because I'm on the virtual machine. Oh, we're not on the West Fork anymore. We're on the North Fork. North Fork Forest. Sounds like a good name. Okay. And then let's make a new project. Save it as North Fork Forest. Okay. And then I'm going to grab the source data here off of D2L. Should be pretty quick here. All right. And extract it to, oh my, where on earth is that? Extract it to this project workspace I just created. I'm sort of leading you through this process because this is creating this folder and this project within this folder is really helpful for keeping track of everything as you work on all these different and increasingly complex projects. Okay, we'll extract it there. Yes. Okay. So now, because I extracted them to the same directory that the project is in, I can find them under Project Home here. We'll just pull up a couple things. Here's the NLCD, National Land Cover Data Set. As you see, we're actually the distinction between the part of this that has data and the black part which has no data is the US-Canadian border. We must be in some sort of goofy reference system here, such that that border doesn't look very horizontal. So let's just go to, you don't really need to do this. This just changes how it looks. Okay, there we go. That's a little more what I expected. So these files that I gave you to start with, here's the land cover data. Here's a simplified version that just shows, it's just binary, it's just true or false, is or is not the pixel representing water. That's just derived from the land cover data with the raster calculator. And then the forest one, same idea. The white pixels, which have values of 1, indicate forest, and the black pixels indicate the absence of forest. And then I gave you in this geo package, which is just a fancy way to package spatial data, I gave you this study area. This gives you an idea of just what we're going to be looking at here. This study area is just a super crude polygon that I drew around the North Fork of the Flathead. In fact, I'm going to make it a little bit more useful by getting rid of the fill, make it just an outline. Okay. But as you can see, the study area extends into Canada and beyond the region that's covered by this National Land Cover data set. And therein lies our problem. So once you get this data in your working directory, once you get a new project going on here, our first step is to install the plugin. If you search for classification, there's a couple different plugins available. We're using this semi-automatic classification plugin. I have used this one with the unpronounceable name as well, and there's a couple other options here. To be honest, they're all a little bit touchy, but if you're going to learn one, this semi-automatic classification one is probably the best. The existence of this plugin has really extended the capabilities of QGIS quite a lot. It just came out, well, the modern version of it just came out last year. So I'm pretty happy that it's reliable enough and usable enough that I get to show it to you guys. So we'll go ahead and install that. Should be pretty quick. Okay, plugins installed. QGIS is updating its list here. Okay, plugin has been installed successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and I will point out also, while I'm here, I might as well install the, I'm on the virtual machine, so I start with a completely fresh version of QGIS every time. I'm going to install this Quick Map Services plugin as well too. You guys probably already have it installed. One good thing to know for the plugin manager here, if you click over to the installed plugins, a couple of these come by default, but you see you can turn things on and off, and that can be really handy. Sometimes they just get unstable and can cause the whole environment to crash. And then sometimes, like with this SCP, semi-automatic classification plugin, they just take up so much space. If you're not using it, you probably want to come in here to this plugins manager and unclick that box just to get rid of it and reclaim your workspace here. Okay, so we got the SCP plugin. So here it is on the left. I'm going to do a couple fancy things to save myself some space here. I'll pull that out as a separate window, and then I'm going to combine it. Nope, that didn't work. I'm going to combine it with the browser. There we go. See, now I have the layers and the browser sharing one space. Real estate gets pretty important here, pretty valuable here. Okay, so this is this dock. This is sort of the home of the SCP plugin. And I'm just going to lead you through the simplest, most linear path through it. And I hope that in doing that, I'll give you a pretty good idea of what it is and how it can be used. If you want to do more with it, go look at the manual online. it is incredibly complex and powerful, but it is it's a course unto itself. And of course, the remote sensing course gives you a much better conceptual understanding of what can be done with this sort of thing. So one of the cool things about this plugin, it's not just an analytical tool. It also provides us with some simple tools for downloading data. So if I go ahead and click on this download products button here, finding data to use for these sorts of classification tasks is not always easy. And it's really an art more than a science. To do it properly, you'd want to know something about the physics of the measurements that the different satellites are making. We're just going to touch on that ever so slightly here. And so if you want, at some point in the future, you can take some time and poke around and look at all the different spatial products that are available. This plugin gives us access to some of the Sentinel data, some of the Landsat data, some MODIS, some GEOS data. I'm actually not quite sure what Raster is. We're going to use this Landsat 8 data. And there's lots of other data that could be used for raster classification or image classification. For example, if you're doing, all this is satellite data that's available here. It's global scale, which is really cool. But if you're doing like a fine scale analysis, you might actually be more interested in data from an airplane or data from a drone. You can get much better resolution. We're going to be working with 30-meter pixels here, 30 meters on a side, so not particularly high resolution data. So Landsat, so we want to define the area that we're looking at. This is one of many aspects of this plugin that could be a little bit more intuitive. But so I'm going to go click over here. You could just type in latitude and longitude, but why would you ever do that, right? So I'm going to click over here to set the area on the map. And then you'd think that would bring me to the map, but it doesn't. So now I'm going to minimize this window. And why can I not see the study area? Where'd you go, Mr. Study Area? Interesting. Let's see if I can get that guy back real quick. Well, we'll give it its fill back and see if it shows up. All right, I got my study area layer back. I just removed it and reloaded it, and it worked. Not sure what was going on there. So, where were we? Here we want to define our the area that we want to search here. So I'm going to click the set area in map, minimize this, and then I'm going to click with the left mouse button up here at the top left, and then click with the right mouse button down here at the bottom right. Not especially intuitive. And then go back to my window here. You can see it populated there. And then the date. I have a date for us that I know has some good imagery. So clouds are one of the biggest issues here. Landsat 8 looks at the Earth through a lot of different wavelengths or bands, as they end up being called. Looks in, for visible light, a red band, a green band, and a blue band. And then it also looks at both longer frequencies and narrower frequencies than visible light. Many of those are affected by clouds. And if you're studying clouds, that's cool, but that's not what we're doing here. So I'm gonna, let's see, September 3rd of 2019, just to simplify this for everyone, September 3rd of 2019. To illustrate how this thing works, I'll search for all of September, but I would encourage you to just grab the 3rd. So that's the start date. 2019 September. So make this window a little bigger. Yeah, a lot going on here. So we've got our location, we've got what products we're looking for. There's a bunch of options about what bands we'd be interested in, all that. We're just going to leave that normal. We've got the date. I'm looking at the whole month, but you can just look for the 3rd if you want. We'll click Find. Takes a minute, and here's a list. Make this bigger yet. Here's a list of what we've got. You can see they have these great human readable names here. I'm joking about that, but they do tell us their cloud cover percent, and then some information about where they are. So typically within a date range, I might sort by cloud cover, and you can see why I ended up picking September 3rd. So let's take a look at these images. I think one of them, so I click on this and I get a preview of it there. And then I can click on this button, Display Preview in Map. I'll click on that and minimize this window. And voila, there's a preview in the map. So let's drag that guy down to below our study area to see. So yeah, not quite all the study area is in that tile, but that's pretty good. Oops. See what other tiles are available. This one only has 2% cloud cover. It looks, at a glance, it looks like it's quite a bit further south. Okay, so this one here on September 3rd, with 0% cloud cover. That's the one we're going to use for our analysis. It will not be able to work for just the northernmost extent of the river valley there. But I don't want to download 2 separate tiles. That would add a ton of computational time. As you'll see, there's enough computational time as it is involved. So 2 ways to do this. One, if you were able to get this layer to preview in the main QGIS window, and if it's the only Landsat layer that's previewed, then you can rely on this little checkbox here, which says to download only the set of these images that are previewed in the layers window in QGIS. Sometimes this little preview downloader is pretty buggy, and so sometimes it can't work, and therefore you can't rely on this to filter down. So you can also just click on the other, oh, maybe. Oh yeah, I'm holding Shift here. You can click on the other images here and remove them. Yes. And then you can unclick this box if the previews hadn't worked. That gets you down to just this one, this September 3rd with no cloud cover. And so we're going to go ahead and click a couple other things before we click Run. We have this pre-process images option checked. There's actually quite a bit. The Landsat data that you download is raw data, and there's quite a bit of pre-processing that's done to make corrections for atmospheric clarity. I believe it does some ortho rectification. It's well beyond what we want to get into, but part of the nice thing about this plugin is that as long as we're smart and we leave this checked, it'll do it for us. It knows its Landsat 8 data. It knows everything about the source and the correct ways to process the data. Then we're going to leave this load bands in QGIS option checked as well. I'm honestly not quite sure what the virtual download thing is. We'll go ahead and not touch that. So I'm going to click run. It asks me where I want to put them. So I'm here in this directory I created for the project. And in fact, this will create two separate folders. It'll create a folder for the raw data and a folder for the processed data. Since it's going to create two separate folders, I'll just let it live directly in this North Fork Forest directory. So just select that where it is. And it's running. If I minimize this, actually I can even just close this plugin window here. That doesn't close the plugin, it just closes the window. And then I can see the process here up top. It's going to download a bunch of different tiles and then it's going to pre-process them. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, we're only looking at one tile here. Why is it downloading a bunch of different tiles? The answer is we're getting, I think, 8 different bands of this one tile. And so those are all these different frequencies that Landsat 8 looks at the Earth through these different frequencies. It's pretty cool. And so you can use this data for a ton of different things. You could calculate NDVI because we have red and then we have near infrared. And it's not the best like visible light imagery because the resolution at 30 meters a pixel is not that great. Like the imagery that Google or someone has is a little better, a little higher resolution visible imagery. But the real strength of this is that it has all these different bands. And that's really useful for this classification because some of the bands just have some additional information in there. For example, the thermal bands are an almost direct measurement of the temperature, the surface temperature of the pixel that they represent. So if you were trying to map glaciers or the extent of snow or something, oh, it made a nice beepy noise when it finished. Some of those thermal bands could be really, really useful. Okay, so it didn't take too long there. Downloaded it and processed it, and it popped a bunch of these guys up here. And, oh, I want to make that smaller, but I can't. Oh, well. So we can look at all these different layers. Like this is band 11. I give you the link in the text that tells you what bands are what. I certainly don't know off the top of my head exactly what band 11 represents. I think it's one of the thermal bands. Band 10, you could sort of look through them. And they're all just rendered in grayscale initially. This is band 7. I'm going to... Well, so, okay, firstly, so this has a built-in tool. They're all just rendered in grayscale because it isn't, on its own, it isn't really truly color imagery. You could give a color to it, to show the intensity of the thermal imagery or something. But it, on their own, these bands are not colors. But we could get a look at the actual, we could combine the red, green, and blue rasters to actually get a look at the visible light image. And so to do that, we click the little check circle here next to RGB, which of course means red, green, and blue, and then we're patient with it for a minute. Oh. Not wanting to show me the red, green, blue. Okay, we'll fix that in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and save this project. Okay, one other thing that can be really useful here, I'm going to collapse all of these guys. There's just so many different layers. And for the most part, we want the computer to work with these. We don't necessarily need to see each one of these layers. So I'm going to put all these guys in a group by highlighting them all, right-clicking, and saying group selected. And I'll just call this Landsat 8. And then I'm going to turn that group off. We still have this one. This is our preview layer. You can see it's different than the others in that it's a memory layer, whereas everything else is actually a file layer. I'm going to go ahead and remove this memory layer here. Oops, one of them escaped the group. Go ahead and drag it in there. All right. So the computer is going to have enough to do here. So I don't need to display all these different layers. I don't need the computer to spend its energy displaying these. It's bands 1 through 11, but a couple are skipped, so I think it's 7 or 8 bands altogether. I don't need the computer to spend its time showing me the pictures. They're not really real color pictures anyway. They don't mean a whole lot to my eyes. Okay, so let's go back. We're going to click on this band set button here just to check that everything's right. So this brought the plugin window back up. Here's the band set. And because we downloaded this Landsat 8 data through this tool and we allowed it to do the pre-processing, it knows what these bands are. It knows what their wavelengths are. And we don't really have to mess with that. And so the band set is the set of raster data that this tool is going to consider when it's making the classifications. And this is where I want to emphasize that a lot of people call this imagery data. And in this case, it is, although some of these images extend beyond what our eyes could see. But in this predefined band set, everything is a satellite image, but we could put any raster that we wanted in here. If we thought that elevation was going to play a big role in our classification scheme, we could put a digital elevation map in there. We can do anything that we want. And so really you can abstract this whole idea beyond just imagery and apply it to rasters in general. And so the band set here, these 7 rasters that we're looking at, we're going to be classifying things based upon contrast in these 7 rasters. I could add more rasters. I could add some Sentinel satellite imagery on top of it. I could add more Landsat imagery from a different date. We're keeping it simple. We're just working with one set of 7 rasters from the same place, and we're just using this predefined band set. But if you go further with this, you can think quite a lot about what the band set could be. And this tool will let you create multiple band sets. You see, we just have one. I suppose you can create another with that button, but I wouldn't recommend it at the moment. So I'm going to go over here to Basic Tools, and I'm going to click down here to RGB list. Again, that's red, green, blue. And it is not given me, I want to add an RGB row. Can I do that, please? There we go. Okay. And I happen to know from looking at the definitions of this Landsat data that band number 4 is the red band, band number 3 is the green band, and band number 2 is the blue band. So this 432 RGB definition will actually give us the visible light representation of this data. And you see something popped up behind me. Let's go take a look at it. So I'm going to close this. And there we go. Again, as we start to zoom in, we certainly see the limitations of the resolution here. Actually, it might be better than I thought it was. I thought it was 30 meters to a pixel, but I think it's better than that. Um, so we've got this virtual band RGB raster. That's the only thing that really works with our eyes. So we'll stick with that for display. Again, I didn't change any of the underlying data. It's still right there. So I think this is actually a good point to take a break in the video. We've gotten all the data downloaded, and we've gotten to the point where we can look at the RGB representation of it. If we wanted, we could look at some other weird representations too. It's kind of fun to do that, but they don't have any. You really have to think about what the bands represent to know what they mean. Whereas at the moment, the meaning is quite clear. It means that the Earth is white right there, and it's blue right there, and it's green right there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a break just so this video isn't too long here.